Welcome to Cryptid Monologues. Let's dive into a world where myths meet imagination. Here we unravel chilling tales of cryptids, Bigfoot, Wendigos, Dogmen, skinwalkers, and more. These stories are crafted to ignite your imagination. These stories are purely fictitious, and names and/or events are purely coincidental. If you like these kind of stories, please give a like and subscribe. Click on the notification bell to stay up to date. Thanks for listening. Let's get into it. Notification to the U.S. Geological Survey. The group returned to the cabin as dusk began to settle over the forest. Shadows stretched long and dark, the towering trees seeming to close in around them. Despite their exhaustion from the day's expedition, no one said much during the drive back. Each of them was lost in thought, grappling with the implications of their findings. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was tense. Elena spread their gathered data across the table once again, pulling up seismic readouts and gas measurements on her laptop. Marcus brewed a pot of coffee while Sarah double-checked their notes, adding annotations to the photographs they'd taken of the fissures. "This isn't something we can sit on," Elena said, breaking the silence. Her voice was firm, but her eyes betrayed a hint of worry. "If the hydrothermal system is destabilizing, and there's even a chance of magma intrusion, we need to report it now." Marcus nodded, his usual skepticism nowhere to be found. "Agreed. The Geological Survey needs to know. This isn't just a local problem, it could affect the whole region." Sarah placed the annotated photos on the table. "And the creature? Are we mentioning that?" Elena hesitated. "Not directly, at least not yet. We don't have concrete evidence, and I don't want to risk our credibility. Let's stick to the geological threat for now." With that, Elena picked up the satellite phone, dialing the direct line to the regional office of the U.S. Geological Survey. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. "USGS Cascades Volcano Observatory. This is Dr. Anders." "Dr. Anders, this is Elena Morales," she began, her tone measured but urgent. "I'm conducting a study near Mount St Helens, and we've identified some concerning activity on the south side of the mountain." "What kind of activity?" Anders asked, his voice sharpening with interest. Elena quickly summarized their findings. "Elevated CO2 and SO2 emissions, abnormal ground temperatures, and a series of fissures near a fumarole on the south ridge. We've also recorded consistent low-frequency tremors in the same area." There was a pause on the other end. "You're certain about these readings?" "Absolutely," Elena replied. "We double-checked everything in the field and corroborated it with historical data from the 1980 eruption. The patterns are eerily similar." Anders let out a low breath. "This could be significant. Are you detecting any deformation? Changes in the surface elevation?" Marcus, overhearing the question, motioned for the laptop. He quickly pulled up a topographic comparison of the area and pointed to a slight bulge in the recent data. Elena relayed the information. "There's minor deformation," she confirmed. "It's subtle but present." Anders didn't hesitate. "This warrants immediate investigation. I'll assemble a team to assess the site, but it might take a day or two for us to get there. In the meantime, I need you to evacuate the area. If the pressure beneath the surface releases suddenly, it could trigger a phreatic eruption without warning." Elena exchanged a glance with Marcus and Sarah. "Understood. We'll leave first thing tomorrow." "And Morales," Anders added, his tone serious. "Good work. But don't take any risks. Whatever's happening up there, it's volatile." After the call ended, the cabin was quiet again, save for the faint crackle of the wood stove. "So that's it?" Marcus asked, leaning back in his chair. "We just pack up and wait for the professionals to swoop in?" Elena shook her head. "We've done our part. Reporting it was the right thing to do. But Anders is right. This situation is dangerous. Staying any longer would be reckless." Sarah, however, looked conflicted. "What about the creature? If the mountain is destabilizing, It might be forced out of its habitat, or worse, caught in the eruption. Shouldn't we try to find out more before we leave? Elena sighed. I know how you feel, but the data takes priority. If the geological survey confirms our findings, they'll close the area and monitor it closely. The creature, it's not something we can control. Marcus folded his arms. So we pack up, leave, and hope the creature doesn't end up in the middle of a disaster? Elena hesitated. If it's as tied to the land as the legends suggest, it might already know how to protect itself. But we can't risk our lives chasing shadows. As they prepared to leave, the tension in the cabin didn't ease. Each of them felt the weight of what they were leaving behind, both the geological threat and the unanswered questions about the creature. That night, as the wind howled through the trees, none of them could sleep. Elena sat by the window, staring out into the darkness, her mind racing. The mountain seemed alive, pulsing with an energy she couldn't quite explain. Somewhere out there, the creature was watching, waiting, and deep beneath the surface, the earth was stirring. The call had been made, the warning delivered. But for Elena, Marcus, and Sarah, the feeling of unfinished business was impossible to shake. Tomorrow, they would leave. But the story of Mount St Helens and the secrets it held was far from over. The USGS response. The morning after Elena's call, the U.S. Geological Survey mobilized a team to assess the reported activity. Dr. Anders led the group, a seasoned volcanologist with decades of experience monitoring the volatile peaks of the Cascades. Alongside him were geochemists, geophysicists, and technicians equipped with advanced monitoring tools, drones for aerial surveys, portable spectrometers for gas analysis, and ground-penetrating radar to map subsurface changes. When they arrived at the south side of Mount St. Helens, the team quickly established a base camp near the fumarole. The gas concentrations Elena had reported were confirmed almost immediately. Elevated levels of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide streamed from the fissures, and ground temperatures were alarmingly high. We're looking at a classic precursor scenario, Anders said, examining the data on his tablet. Gas buildup, seismic tremors, surface deformation, it's all there. The question is how far along the system is. Meanwhile, Elena, Marcus, and Sarah had retreated to a ranger station near Cougar, as directed by Dr. Anders. While Marcus and Elena were focused on organizing their findings and preparing to brief the incoming USGS team further, Sarah seemed distracted. She lingered near the window, her gaze fixed on the distant silhouette of the mountain. Her fingers tapped absently on the table, and a faint tension lined her face. "Sarah?" Elena asked, noticing her unease. "You've been quiet all morning. What's on your mind?" Sarah hesitated, then turned to face her. "I've been thinking about the creature. If the USGS team is investigating, they need to know about it." Marcus frowned. "You're not seriously suggesting we tell them, are you? We don't have solid proof. They'll think we're crazy." "But what if it's relevant?" Sarah pressed. "If the creature's movements are tied to the mountain's activity, it could be another indicator of what's happening underground." Elena sighed. "Sarah, I get it. I do. But without evidence, tracks, a clear photo, something, they won't take it seriously." Sarah crossed her arms, her expression firm. "Then I'll tell them what I saw. They deserve to know." Later that day, when the USGS team returned to Cougar for a preliminary briefing, Sarah took her opportunity. The team had gathered in a conference room at the ranger station, where Elena presented their data and findings. "This is invaluable work," Anders said, nodding in approval. "Your observations have given us a critical head start. We're monitoring the situation closely now." As the meeting began to wrap up, Sarah stood. "Dr. Anders, there's something else you need to know." Anders raised an eyebrow, and the room fell silent. "Go on." Sarah took a steadying breath. "While we were on the mountain, we encountered something unusual. Large tracks in the volcanic soil, far too big to be human. And at night, we heard sounds, growls, deep and guttural. Whatever it was, it's not a known animal. Anders exchanged a skeptical glance with one of his colleagues. Are you suggesting a connection to the mountain's activity? Yes, Sarah said, her voice unwavering. The local legends speak of a guardian tied to Mount St Helens, the creature people call Bigfoot. I know how it sounds, but I believe it's reacting to geological changes. If we ignore it, we could miss an important piece of the puzzle. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Anders finally spoke, his tone measured. We deal in science, not folklore. But if there's a pattern in this region's history that aligns with seismic or volcanic events, we should at least consider it as part of the broader context. Do you have physical evidence of these tracks or sounds? Sarah hesitated, then shook her head. No, just our observations. Anders nodded. I'll note your account, but without evidence it remains anecdotal. If you encounter anything else, anything concrete, document it. In the meantime, we need to focus on the immediate geological threat. After the meeting, Sarah felt a mix of relief and frustration. She had spoken the truth, but whether it would have influence was unclear. Elena approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing. Even if they don't fully believe you, at least the idea is out there. Maybe, Sarah said, staring out the window at the mountain. But I can't shake the feeling that the creature knows something we don't, and if we don't pay attention, we're going to miss it. Back on the mountain, Anders and his team made a startling discovery. While analyzing the fissures, they found strange markings along the edges, scratches too deep and deliberate to be caused by natural erosion. What the hell made these? One of the technicians murmured, running a hand along the jagged grooves. Anders frowned, his mind racing. He didn't want to admit it, but Sarah's account lingered in the back of his mind. Something about this mountain felt different, as if it were alive in ways they hadn't yet understood. Document everything, he ordered, his voice clipped. We need every detail. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the mountain's secrets remained shrouded in darkness. But for Sarah, Elena, and the USGS team, one thing was clear. Mount St. Helens was far from dormant, and its mysteries were just beginning to surface. Back at the ranger station, Sarah couldn't shake the frustration of being dismissed by the USGS. While Anders and his team focused on the volcanic threat, she was convinced that understanding the creature could provide crucial insights. We're not done here, Sarah said, her voice steady as she paced the cabin that evening. The creature is tied to the mountain somehow. We've seen the signs, its tracks, the growls, even the markings Anders' team found. If we leave now, we might miss our chance to figure out what it knows. Marcus looked skeptical but intrigued. And how do you propose we investigate? Without ending up on the evening news as those conspiracy theorists who chased Bigfoot? Elena, seated at the table and poring over her notes, sighed. I hate to admit it, but Sarah has a point. There's something unusual about this whole situation. If the creature really is reacting to the geological changes, it could give us more context, or at least some warning signs. Sarah leaned forward, determination shining in her eyes. Then we go back. Not to the fumaroles, but deeper into the forest. Follow the path where I found those tracks. If the creature's habitat overlaps with the fault line, we'll learn something about both. Marcus groaned but grabbed his field pack. Fine, but if we find nothing, I'm reserving the right to say, I told you so, for the next decade. Early the next morning, the trio set out. Armed with trail cams, thermal imaging equipment, and a drone, they aimed to gather evidence of either the creature or the geological shifts. The forest was eerily quiet as they trekked deeper into the wilderness, far beyond the established trails. The dense canopy above filtered the sunlight into faint, dappled patches on the ground. This area is completely off the grid, Sarah said, consulting her GPS. No hiking trails, no campsites. If the creature's real, this is where it would stay. They moved cautiously, scanning the ground for tracks or other signs of movement. About an hour into their hike, Marcus paused, kneeling near a patch of disturbed soil. "Hey, look at this," he said, motioning for the others. In the dirt were massive impressions, unmistakably footprints. The prints were nearly twice the size of a human's, with deep defined grooves where toes might have been. "Those are fresh," Sarah whispered, her voice tinged with excitement. Elena crouched beside the prints, using a ruler to measure their size. "This matches the tracks we saw near the fumaroles. Whatever made these is heavy. Look at the depth of the impressions. It's not a hoax." Marcus set up a trail cam aimed at the path the tracks seemed to follow. "If it comes back this way, we'll catch it on video." As they continued, they found more evidence. Broken branches at unusual heights, patches of moss scraped clean from boulders, and strange markings etched into tree trunks. "These scratches look deliberate," Elena noted, examining a tree. "Too high for a bear, and the patterns too regular." Marcus snapped photos while Sarah scanned the area with the thermal imaging device. "I've got a heat signature," she said suddenly, her voice low. Elena and Marcus turned to look at her screen. A faint, humanoid shape appeared in the distance, just at the edge of the thermal camera's range. "It's watching us," Sarah murmured. "Or stalking us," Marcus muttered, his hand instinctively reaching for the bear spray clipped to his belt. Elena waved for them to stay still. "Let's not provoke it. Keep your distance and document everything." The figure lingered for a moment, then vanished into the forest. They followed the tracks to a clearing surrounded by towering basalt formations. In the center of the clearing was something none of them expected, a circle of stones, carefully arranged, with strange symbols carved into their surfaces. "What is this?" Marcus asked, his voice tinged with awe. Elena crouched to examine the carvings. "These aren't natural, they're too precise, but they don't match any known cultural markings from this area." Sarah knelt beside her, running her fingers over the stones. "What if this is the creature's doing? It could be a territorial marker, or something more." Elena looked thoughtful. "Or it could be tied to the mountain. If this creature has lived here for centuries, it might have developed its own way of understanding volcanic activity. These symbols could be warnings." Marcus pulled out the drone and sent it up for an aerial survey. As it rose, the camera revealed something chilling. A perfect line of similar clearings, all running parallel to the fault line Elena had been studying. "This isn't random," Marcus said, staring at the screen. "The creature knows about the fault line. It's marking it." The trio worked quickly, documenting the site and collecting as much data as possible. But as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, they agreed it was time to head back. As they retraced their steps, the forest seemed to close in around them. The growl Sarah had heard before came again, louder this time, and closer. "It knows we've been here," Sarah whispered, gripping her thermal camera. Elena's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Stay calm. If it wanted to hurt us, it would have already." The growl faded into the distance, and they reached their truck just as night fell. Once safely back at the cabin, they reviewed their findings. The footage from the drone, the thermal images, the tracks, it all painted a picture of a creature deeply connected to the mountain, its behavior seemingly tied to the geological shifts. "This isn't just an animal," Elena said. "It's something more, something ancient, and it knows this mountain better than we ever could." Sarah nodded. "Maybe it's trying to protect the land, or warn us. Either way, we need to take this seriously." Marcus sighed. "The question is, will anyone believe us?" Elena glanced at the pile of evidence they had gathered. "They might not, but we'll keep looking for the truth and for a way to understand what's really happening here." As the cabin grew quiet, the trio knew their journey was far from over. The mountain had revealed its secrets, piece by piece, but the biggest questions still loomed. What was the creature's role in the unfolding events? And how much time did they have before the mountain's fury was unleashed? Thanks so much from Cryptid Monologues for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. And hey, while you're here, check out these videos. You'll definitely love them. See you in the next one.